need her young. We need her hot.
What a gorgeous little...
Out of town every other week.
The movie starts with a hand, covered by a black glove, injects a mysterious substance into the yolk of an egg. Moments later, the egg splits, producing a duplicate. Meanwhile, at the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a star bearing the name of Oscar winner Elizabeth Sparkle is revealed. However, as time passes, the star begins to lose its shine, symbolizing Sparkle's fading fame. Once a celebrated actress, she now hosts an aerobics TV show. Though she is still in good shape for her age, Elizabeth begins to feel the weight of time catching up with her. One day, while using a restroom, she overhears her show's producer, Harvey, criticizing her, saying she is outdated and that they need a younger, more attractive host. He bluntly states, "It's time for Elizabeth to retire," referencing how her Oscar win occurred during the early days of cinema. Deeply upset, Elizabeth later joins Harvey for lunch, where he casually confirms her retirement, laughing as he leaves with a friend. As she watches a fly land in her wine glass, Elizabeth feels as powerless as the insect. Distracted while driving home, Elizabeth notices workers taking down her billboard, leading her to get into a car accident. At the hospital, the doctor recognizes her and compliments her past success, but she breaks down, realizing her fame is slipping away. Embarrassed, the doctor leaves, but a young nurse begins examining Elizabeth's back, muttering something about her being ideal for an experiment. Before departing, the nurse secretly slips a flash drive into Elizabeth's pocket, featuring a product called the Substance. Elizabeth notices the flash drive and reads the product's name, before being interrupted by an old classmate, Fred, who is delighted to see her. He suggests catching up and reminiscing, writing his phone number on a piece of soaked paper, which he hands to Elizabeth. Though she pretends to be happy to see him, in truth, she's sinking into a deep depression. Her mood worsens when she arrives home to find a bouquet with a note thanking her for years of service. Feeling lost, Elizabeth inserts the flash drive into her TV and watches a commercial for the Substance. The advertisement explains that the substance, once injected, unlocks a person's DNA, leading to cell division and the creation of an identical, yet improved version of the individual. This new version is younger, more beautiful, and perfect in every way. The catch? The two versions must coexist and switch every 7 days, always remembering that they are part of the same whole. Desperate, Elizabeth goes to a bar, where she observes happy couples, realizing just how lonely she's become. After reflecting on her life, she decides to order the substance. She calls the provided number and is given a postbox where she can collect it. The call ends abruptly, leaving Elizabeth anxious. That night, she struggles to sleep, and the next morning, she sees an ad in the newspaper searching for her replacement as the show's host. At the same time, she receives a letter in the mail with a card containing the postbox information for the substance. Determined, Elizabeth goes to retrieve the package. Using the card, she unlocks a secret door in an old building, where a storage unit awaits her. Inside the box are various components, neatly packed and labeled: activator, stabilizer, the other you, and matrix food. The instructions are clear. The activator is used only once, but the stabilizer must be administered daily, drawn from the matrix cells. Most crucially, the two versions must switch places every 7 days without fail, and they must always remember they are one entity. The next morning, Elizabeth stands in front of the mirror, scrutinizing the visible signs of her aging. Eventually, she injects the activator. The process is agonizing. She collapses, writhing in pain as her back splits open, giving birth to a younger, more vibrant version of herself. This new personality slowly awakens, marveling at her reflection in the mirror, where she sees a youthful and beautiful face staring back. At first, she revels in her newfound beauty, but then her gaze lands on Elizabeth's unconscious body. She carefully tends to the older version, stitching up the tear in her back before tucking her away in bed. In the morning, the younger version showers, but soon feels ill. She uses a special syringe to inject the stabilizer, which is drawn from Elizabeth's spine. Feeling revitalized, the young woman is thrilled by her new physique and heads to a casting call. Along the way, she buys a revealing swimsuit and takes the name Sue. Her stunning appearance quickly captures the attention of the show's assistants, and eventually, Harvey himself. Sue is selected to replace Elizabeth as the show's new host, but she warns Harvey that every 7 days, she will need to take time off to care for her sick mother. Harvey is charmed by her humility, confident that the audience will adore her. As Sue basks in the fame that once belonged to Elizabeth, the days pass quickly, and soon it's time for the first switch. Sue attaches tubes to her arms, allowing the substance to transfer between them. Elizabeth awakens as Sue falls into a deep sleep. After cleaning herself up, Elizabeth returns to the studio, where Harvey presents her with a gift from the crew. Back home, she marks the days on her calendar, counting down to when she can be herself again. The cycle repeats as Elizabeth receives another batch of the substance after 7 days. Once again, they switch, and Sue continues to enjoy her newfound life, starring in commercials and embracing her growing popularity. But as time goes on, Sue becomes curious about the Matrix body and creates a secret room in the bathroom to store Elizabeth's unconscious form. One day, her neighbor knocks, disturbed by the noise from her construction work. Smitten by Sue's appearance, he offers to help, but she slams the door in his face. Sue's popularity skyrockets, and her show becomes a massive success. She begins attending lavish parties and making new friends. One evening, she invites a young man to her home, but when things start to get intimate, she suddenly feels unwell. Realizing it's time for the switch, Sue rushes to her secret room to perform an additional stabilizer procedure. Afterward, she spends the night with the young man, before switching with Elizabeth. When Elizabeth wakes up later than usual, she finds her apartment in disarray, and her hands twisted with gout. Struggling to get herself together, she calls the substance provider, only to be told that the changes to her body are irreversible. They remind her once again that she and Sue are one whole. After tidying up the apartment, Elizabeth catches a glimpse of Sue's new show on TV. She can't help but admit how stunning Sue looks. Later, she hears her neighbor trying to ask Sue out on a date, but Sue doesn't respond to the knock at the door. After receiving her next batch of the substance, Elizabeth stops by a cafe, where an elderly man strikes up a conversation. He expresses how difficult it is to wait 7 days to return to his body. As he drops his cards, Elizabeth notices one identical to her own substance card. Realizing the man is the nurse who had originally introduced her to the experiment, she sees in his eyes a knowledge. Each time, it becomes harder to remember that they deserve to exist. Soon, the second version of herself will begin to consume her. Rushing home, Elizabeth bumps into Sue's boyfriend, who fails to recognize her. This triggers memories of Fred, and she calls him. Ecstatic, Fred arranges a meeting at a cafe. Elizabeth dresses up, putting on makeup and hiding her hands under gloves. However, when she sees a billboard of Sue, she is immediately disappointed by her own reflection. She wipes off her makeup, tears off her dress, and ignores Fred's persistent calls, resorting to binge eating to cope with her depression and insecurity. Meanwhile, Sue continues her rise to fame. During the filming of her show, she suddenly feels something beneath the skin of her buttocks. Halting production, she rushes to the bathroom, where she discovers a fried chicken leg emerging from her navel. She realizes that while she is living a glamorous life, Elizabeth is binge-eating at home. Furious, Sue contacts the substance provider, but they simply remind her that she and Elizabeth are one whole. Weeks pass. Sue summons Harvey to announce that she will be the host of their highly anticipated New Year's show, the pinnacle of her career. Though overjoyed, she starts abusing the stabilizer more frequently, causing Elizabeth's body to age rapidly. When Elizabeth wakes up again, she finds herself old, decrepit, with stiff joints and graying hair. Panicked, she calls the substance provider, who suggests ending the experiment, but there's no way to reverse her condition. Though Elizabeth considers stopping the process, she can't bring herself to abandon the beautiful version of herself. Despite her frail state, she remembers the cookbook Harvey gifted her and throws herself into learning new recipes. Meanwhile, Sue continues to dominate the airwaves. One day, Elizabeth overhears Sue mocking her, calling her an aging star. Enraged, Elizabeth eats even more and vows to put an end to the experiment. When the next switch occurs, Sue wakes up to find a room littered with food and empty bottles. Realizing she needs more independence from her Matrix self, Sue stockpiles stabilizers for 3 months. However, just before the live New Year's broadcast, she runs out of stabilizer. Desperate, she calls the provider, but they remind her that Elizabeth is the only source, and they must switch to replenish the supply. Sue, barely conscious, initiates the switch. Her boyfriend hears strange noises from the bathroom, but when he knocks, Sue, now deformed with a bald head and a hunchback, refuses to let him in, screaming at him until he flees. Elizabeth, now a grotesque figure, calls the substance provider, begging to end the experiment. She retrieves the final batch of the substance and drags Sue's unconscious body into the living room, preparing to inject her with a serum that will kill the younger version for good. With the syringe in hand, Elizabeth hesitates, staring at the portraits of Sue. Realizing she can't bring herself to kill the younger version, she revives Sue instead. When Sue awakens and sees the half-empty syringe, she realizes what Elizabeth had intended. Enraged, Sue beats Elizabeth to death. Afterward, Sue heads to the New Year's show in a glamorous gown, but as the show begins, she feels unwell. With the Matrix dead, Sue's body starts to deteriorate rapidly. Her teeth fall out, preventing her from smiling for the sponsors, much to Harvey's dismay. Her nails fall off, followed by her ear. In a panic, Sue rushes home, injecting herself with the last of the activator, hoping to create a new version of herself. Instead, a monstrous hybrid of both Elizabeth and Sue, dubbed Eliza Sue, is born. Eliza Sue, now a grotesque fusion of both women, recalls her audition and attempts to make herself presentable, donning a dress and a crude mask of Elizabeth's face. She heads to the TV studio and steps onto the stage. But as she begins to address the audience, her mask falls off, revealing her horrifying appearance. The crowd screams in terror, fleeing the scene as one man decapitates Eliza Sue. Blood floods the studio, and what's left of her disintegrates on the street. Elizabeth's original face, now separated from the body, crawls to her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where it smiles before melting away. By the next morning, the remaining puddle of blood is scrubbed clean, erasing the last traces of the once famous actress. Though at times darkly humorous, the film offers a chilling reflection on society's obsession with beauty and the lengths to which people will go to maintain youth. It forces viewers to consider the importance of accepting oneself and the danger of losing one's identity in the pursuit of perfection.